On March 24, 2012, in the early hours at approximately 3:36 a.m., Julio A. Torres, aged 34, was fatally shot while seated inside his vehicle in the parking lot of the West Reading Diner in Pennsylvania. The incident occurred following a verbal altercation between Torres and two men. Torres had arrived at the diner alone, maybe seeking a late-night meal. The diner, a popular spot in the community, was relatively quiet at that hour. Torres parked his car, and it was at this moment that he encountered the suspects. Witnesses later described a heated argument between Torres and the two men, escalating quickly and drawing the attention of the few remaining patrons and staff inside the diner. The argument's exact cause remains unclear, but what is known is that as Torres attempted to de-escalate and retreat to his car, one of the men pulled out a firearm and shot him. The gunman and his accomplice then fled the scene, leaving Torres mortally wounded. The entire altercation and the moments leading up to it were captured on the diner's surveillance cameras, providing crucial evidence for investigators. Surveillance footage from the diner showed the suspects holding styrofoam cups just before the shooting. These cups, along with a bitten-off piece from one, were collected from the crime scene and sent to the Pennsylvania State Police Forensic Crime Laboratory for DNA analysis. The DNA analysis revealed two profiles. One was linked to Jermaine Case, who was arrested and convicted for his involvement in the altercation. However, Case was determined not to be the shooter, leaving the primary assailant unidentified. Despite efforts by the joint task force formed by the West Reading Police Department and the District Attorney's Office, the DNA from the bitten-off piece of the cup did not match any profiles in national databases, stalling the investigation. In the months following the murder, the West Reading Police Department and the District Attorney's Office formed a joint task force to tackle the case, highlighting the significant resources and collaborative efforts dedicated to solving it early on. Despite these efforts, the investigation reached a standstill as the shooter remained unidentified. In 2023, as part of a cold case initiative, the Berks County District Attorney's Office revisited the case. The introduction of advanced facial recognition software marked a significant turning point. A photo extracted from a cell phone taken at a party shortly before the crime was re-examined. The software identified Vallis Slaughter, originally from Brooklyn, NY, as the man in the photo. Upon identifying Slaughter, investigators tracked him to Jersey City, New York, where he was living with his mother. Starting in December 2023, authorities initiated a covert surveillance operation. Detectives closely monitored Slaughter's daily activities, noting his habits and movements. This surveillance was meticulously planned and executed, as investigators needed a way to obtain a fresh DNA sample without alerting Slaughter. For weeks, the detectives watched Slaughter's routine. They observed him as he left his residence each morning, noting the times and locations of his activities. They documented his interactions, paying particular attention to his habits. One detail that stood out was his regular smoking. Detectives knew that obtaining a discarded cigarette butt could provide the DNA evidence they needed to confirm his involvement in the murder. The critical breakthrough came on February 9, 2024. During their surveillance, detectives observed Slaughter smoking a cigarette outside his residence. After discarding the butt on the sidewalk, investigators quickly collected it. This cigarette butt was sent to the Pennsylvania State Police Forensic Crime Laboratory for DNA analysis. In March 2024, the lab confirmed that the DNA from the cigarette filter matched the DNA from the bitten-off piece of the styrofoam cup left at the crime scene 12 years earlier. On March 20, 2024, Vallis Slaughter was arrested at his residence in Jersey City. He was taken into custody by Jersey City Police and is awaiting extradition to Pennsylvania. Slaughter, now 39, faces charges of murder, aggravated assault, and conspiracy. According to Berks County District Attorney John Adams, Slaughter is also a suspect in a separate homicide case in Brooklyn, highlighting his potential involvement in multiple serious crimes. During a news conference, DA John Adams emphasized the significance of the technological advancements and the persistence of law enforcement in solving this case. He stated, "Just having that DNA sample isn't enough, but we were able to utilize technology to identify this individual, and now we have confirmed that identification with DNA. We are not going to give up, and if we can continue to pursue justice for the victim, we will do so." As far as we're concerned, what could have sparked the violent argument in the parking lot that night? And how did it escalate to such a tragic outcome? In November 1988, a brutal crime shocked the town of Grand Chute, Wisconsin. Betty Rolf, a 60-year-old woman, while on a short walk to work, went missing. Less than 20 minutes after her disappearance was reported, her body was found face down on West Spencer Street, partially covered with loose gravel near a bridge footing support by railroad tracks. She was wearing a winter coat but was nude from the waist down, and a black purse strap was wrapped around her neck, indicating strangulation. The autopsy revealed blunt force trauma to her head and face and signs of sexual assault, confirming that foul play was involved. Betty Rolf was a cherished member of her community, admired for her relentless work ethic and commitment. She juggled several jobs to provide for her family, with one of her roles being at the Country Air Banquet Room. Conveniently, her residence on West Spencer Street was situated less than a mile from her job, making her morning strolls a daily habit. Despite facing numerous challenges, including a tumultuous marriage, Betty remained a pillar of strength and love for those around her, making her fate all the more tragic. On the early morning of November 6, 1988, Betty Rolf departed from her house as usual, walking her way to work. But that Sunday, Betty never arrived there. Her absence was unusual and immediately worried her co-workers and family. When she did not return home later that day, her family became increasingly concerned and reported her missing to the police. The next morning, local authorities conducted a thorough search. The community was anxious, waiting for any news about Betty. Tragically, their worst fears were confirmed when her body was found near a railroad underpass on West Spencer Street, just half a mile from her home. Betty was discovered partially clothed near a railroad crossing and bridge. The scene was grim. She had been beaten, assaulted, and strangled with a strap from her purse. Some of the contents of her purse were scattered around, including $30 in cash, and a document she planned to send to a local newspaper about her and her husband's upcoming anniversary. The police launched an intensive investigation, looking for witnesses and collecting evidence from the crime scene. Despite their efforts, the initial investigation yielded few leads. The technology available at the time limited the forensic analysis, and the case quickly grew cold. For over 3 decades, Betty Rolf's demise remained an unsolved mystery. Years later, in 2001, a re-examination of the DNA provided a male DNA profile, but it still did not produce a match in the federal database. It wasn't until 2019, with the advent of genetic genealogy, that the case saw a breakthrough. Investigators used specialized software to trace potential relatives of the suspect through the DNA profile. This innovative approach led them to 2 potential suspects, Gene Meyer and his brother. Meyer's brother initially believed Gene to be dead, but further investigation revealed that Gene Meyer was alive and living in Washington state. In November 2022, federal authorities tracked down Meyer and obtained his DNA from the door handle of his Dodge Ram. The DNA profile matched the DNA found at the crime scene, conclusively linking Meyer to the murder of Betty Rolf. Meyer was arrested on charges of first-degree murder and first-degree sexual assault with a deadly weapon. Meyer's trial began on May 13, 2023, in the Outagamie County Circuit Court, having been delayed due to his health issues. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, including the DNA match and testimony about Meyer's suspicious behavior following the crime. During the trial, it was revealed that shortly after the murder, Meyer had called his sister to say, "Thank you for everything. and goodbye, suggesting he was troubled by his actions. His niece also recalled her mother mentioning a secret that she intended to take to her grave. While the legal preparations began, the prosecution meticulously built its case, using the conclusive DNA evidence linking Meyer to the crime scene. Throughout the trial, which lasted over a week in May 2024, the courtroom was riveted as the harrowing details of the crime were reviewed and scrutinized. The prosecution and defense took turns presenting their arguments, focusing on the forensic evidence and the events leading to Betty's passing. On May 21, 2024, an Outagamie County jury found Gene Meyer guilty of first-degree murder and first-degree sexual assault. His sentencing was scheduled for July 11, 2024. Meyer was sentenced to life in prison with the chance of parole after 34 years for the 2 charges that will run consecutively. Betty's daughter, Sheila Worm, expressed relief outside the courtroom, saying, "We can rest easy now that they have him and that he is going away for a long time." This conviction brought a long-awaited sense of justice to Betty Rolf's family and the community of Grand Chute, highlighting the relentless pursuit of truth by law enforcement and the remarkable advancements in forensic science. In the spring of 2016, Anita Cowen rented a room in her Cathedral City, California home to a man named Scott Pettigrew. What began as a kind gesture quickly turned into a nightmare for the 66-year-old woman. Pettigrew's behavior soon became erratic and abusive, leading to a tragic and horrifying conclusion. Anita Cowen was a successful businesswoman who owned a nursing agency and had bought a home in Cathedral City. To help with finances, she rented out rooms in her house, finding tenants through Craigslist. There, she came across Scott Pettigrew. Scott Pettigrew, a 50-year-old man, moved into Anita's home after being evicted due to an altercation with a neighbor. Almost immediately, issues arose. Pettigrew stopped paying rent after the first month. He kept the house in a filthy state and allowed his dogs to defecate indoors. He also threw trash in the kitchen sink, refused to clean up after vomiting in the bathroom, stole Anita's silverware, and poured water over electrical appliances. Pettigrew's behavior became increasingly threatening. He made Anita's life unbearable with constant threats and harassment. By June 9, 2016, Anita had enough and sought a restraining order against Pettigrew. "I am being terrorized daily in my own home," she stated. "I need help." Anita described Pettigrew's angry tirades and his intention to keep her in constant fear. "What will he do next time?" Anita wrote. "I don't want a next time." The court granted her request, mandating that Pettigrew keep a 5-yard distance from her and remove his dogs from the property. However, the order did not require him to vacate the house. On June 14, 2016, while on the phone with her son, Anita was interrupted by an argument with Pettigrew. Her son heard yelling and glass breaking. "Scott's there," she reportedly said to her son. "He is doing it again." Concerned, he instructed Anita to turn on her audio recorder while he and his wife rushed to her aid. He called the police, asking for an immediate welfare check. When officers arrived at 11:42 p.m., they found Anita floating in her pool, unresponsive, with cuts and bruises on her body and chunks of hair pulled out of her head. Inside the house, Pettigrew was found naked with scratches all over his body. The house was in a state of total disarray. The kitchen was messy with dirty dishes, shattered glass, and clumps of Anita's hair scattered on the floor. Dirty dishes piled high in the sink and a mostly empty refrigerator hinted at the neglect and turmoil she lived in. A black rug in front of the French doors showed skid marks from blood or another fluid leading to the pool. In Anita's bedroom, police found all her belongings, including kitchen items and food, indicating she was trying to avoid Pettigrew. Pettigrew's room was the worst. It was filled with trash, dirty dishes, wet clothes, alcohol bottles, food containers, and sleeping pills. The bed was bare and the room was filthy. The entire house smelled of dog urine, and dog feces were scattered throughout the home. While searching the house, police found a digital audio recorder on the kitchen floor, amid the shattered glass and clumps of Anita's hair. Anita had managed to tape her own murder. The recording captured her desperate pleas and Pettigrew's violent outbursts. "Stay away from me," Anita can be heard saying. "Stay the away from me, you bastard. Now you're going to start beating up an old lady, huh?" Pettigrew responded with vile insults and threats. An autopsy was conducted which revealed that Anita died from blunt force trauma to the head, with multiple injuries indicating a violent struggle. The evidence collected, including the audio recording and the crime scene details, pointed directly to Pettigrew. Anita had hemorrhaging beneath her scalp and signs of strangulation, further confirming the brutal nature of her death. Scott Pettigrew was apprehended right away and taken into custody. During his trial, he pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder, elder abuse, and violating a protective order. Toxicology tests taken the morning after Anita's murder indicated that Pettigrew had been drinking heavily and was likely profoundly under the influence at the time of the attack. Pettigrew's defense team argued that his emotional state and intoxication meant the murder was not premeditated. However, the prosecution presented evidence which alleged that Pettigrew had attacked Anita after an argument in the kitchen, escalating to a prolonged assault that spanned the interior and extended into the backyard. Not to mention, following his initial arrest, Pettigrew attempted suicide twice, which some jurors saw as further evidence of his guilt or an attempt to avoid prosecution. Despite his defense team's efforts to reduce the charges, Pettigrew was convicted of first-degree murder, elder abuse, and violating a protective order in August 2019. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison and is currently serving his sentence at the California State Prison. The victim was particularly vulnerable, Judge Janetta Anderson noted during the sentencing hearing. The defendant took advantage of his position of trust to commit this offense. The case of Anita Cowen serves as a chilling reminder of the dangers lurking within domestic settings. Her tragic death underscores the necessity of thorough tenant screening and robust legal protections for vulnerable individuals. Always be cautious about who you let into your home. If you find this video compelling, show your support by giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel, and ringing that notification bell. By doing so, you'll stay updated about the latest investigations and mysteries. Your support means the world to us as we continue to pursue the truth in the world of cold cases.